Hi, everybody. Eric Bailey and Eli Letterman talking everything OU athletics on our Tulsa World podcast. It's our weekly meeting where we talk about everything OU related. It seems like it'd be a slow time, but nothing slows
We have a
down during the
lot to
school
talk
year.
about, Eric. We have a
There's a lot
lot
to
to
talk
talk
about.
about.
It's going to be another fun weekend. My favorite thing about my job is getting to tell stories that aren't usually told. It's not about, how this team shot on this particular day or how many home runs this batter hit. It's kind of the off the beaten path story. And I know you had a good one this week that me and you have been talking about for a month. You've been working on this for a while, and it made print this week. It's about an OU men's basketball analyst who lives in a van outside the Lloyd Noble Center. So he doesn't have a home. You see all these TikToks about people who live in their vans. Tell us about Doc Sadler, Eli. You wrote an amazing story, fun story. It's a great read. Just tell us about Doc.
Well, I appreciate that. And I'll start out here because there was, I guess, some slight. He is voluntarily living in a van. This was a choice. He's chosen the van life. But I guess, there's two places to start with Doc Sadler. One is we're talking about a basketball lifer who began his career in basketball as a student manager with Eddie Sutton at Arkansas in 1979 and didn't leave basketball for the next 45 years, just jumped around. He spent, it took him about 20 years as an assistant before he even got a head coaching job. So he already had a career, a career enough as an assistant before even getting into head coaching, but had stops at UTEP, Nebraska, Southern Miss, before kind of a similar role to what he has now at OU at Nebraska. He went back there as an assistant under Fred Hoiberg the last few years, and then decided to retire and said he was going to take it a step back. And so he and his wife Tanya bought this camper van. It's nice. I've been in it. It's the kind that you can travel in. You can drive cross country in, and that's what they planned to do with the time they finally had, was to see the world. And they started to. They made trips. But then 6 days before U's men's basketball season, Porter Moser had Matt Brady, an assistant he'd hired in the summer, resign abruptly, and his call was to Doc Sadler, a friend of 30 years. They'd met in Texas when Porter was an assistant at A&M, and Doc Sadler was at Texas Tech. They'd been in Arkansas together, overlapping, and Porter wanted him here, and so Doc made the decision to kind of drop retirement, at least temporarily. And when he chose to do that, he didn't want to live in a hotel. He didn't want to live in a rental apartment. He chose to bring the camper van. It's known as the Docster, and he parked it. There's some numbers in the story, but it's a few hundred yards from Lloyd Noble Center. If you've been to a hoops game there this year, you've probably seen it and not thought anything of it.
It's great. We've got some great pictures by Daniel Schuler, Tulsa World photographer, online at tulsaworld.com, showing the Docster. I had a chance to drive by it last night when I was covering a basketball game, and it's amazing. It fits right in, and it's not as big as you'd think. When you first told me this story about the story idea, I envisioned a huge
You're like an RV, right?
big RV, yeah, where just took up a lot of space. This isn't that big. It typically it's perfect for one or two people. It really is, and it really almost inspires me to do something like this, because I thought it's a cool van. And you're in your story, you had a great part about the size of the van driving through Boston. Can you tell that story a little bit?
Yeah. Well, so the dimensions are, it's 21 feet long, about 6'3" wide, and 9 feet 4 inches in height. And yeah, Doc was telling me, they took it to the Northeast, him and Tanya, this summer. It's driven through Times Square. They went up to New England, and he was in Boston, he said, on the highway, and he saw something about the clearance. And it was pretty early after he bought it, and he was, going down the highway and thinking to himself, I don't know if I'm going to make this clearance. I might scrape the roof off of this thing. And so there really were just those fun little anecdotes in it that any of us, would either think of if someone told you they live in a van, or if you live in a van, it turns out like these are the problems you have to consider. And there's things like that. Another issue that popped up for Doc really recently, as recently as Sunday, were the tornadoes that swept through Norman. And I was actually thinking about him Sunday night as I was writing this, because we talked about it. He said the wind just on a normal night in Norman, it's unprotected in a parking lot, will kind of rock the van back and forth. A tornado, when you're watching the news and you hear David Payne telling you, mobile homes are no longer safe, you wonder. So he parked it in a garage and spent the night in the coach's lounge at Lloyd Noble Center. And better yet, to really cap it off, the tornadoes required some disaster relief, and so the next day, Doc had all these new neighbors in the parking lot. It was a fleet of disaster relief vehicles and emergency response workers from all over the country, and he even tweeted that out. And so I think another thing that's just probably worth getting in here, and I hope it comes through in the story, is that Doc really does have a tremendous spirit and a sense of humor, and it came through in my interactions, or has in my interactions with him, and also talking to Porter Moser and to players. He can't coach on court in his role. He's an advisor technically, but he has been an asset for them. And what's been a really disappointing season for the Sooners, he's brought, I think, a lot to the table.
It's a very fun read. If you get a chance to read it, still toptulsaworld.com. There's so much in that story. He talks a lot about his history, how, his ties to Oklahoma State, ties to Arkansas, where he started in Arkansas. Talked about Bill Rafferty.
Yeah, Rafferty.
Rafferty. Yeah, Rafferty. Yeah.
Man.
I'll just say onions. The guy who says onions and man to man. I can't ever say his last name. Talk about how when he called a game. Which game did he call? Do you remember? Was it OU Kansas?
He was there for OU Kansas in February.
Yeah. He took a visit out there to see the van. He had to see the van, so I thought that was pretty cool too. So great story. And again, these are the kind of stories that are fun for us to write. It's off the beaten path. You put a little bit of time into it. You get to it always excites me to write a story like this, because you learn more and more about the individual you're writing about, and things you just didn't know. You learn, and then when you get to send that to the reader and educate them a little bit, it's a lot of fun. So get a chance to read this story. Take a chance to read it.
I'll give you 2 more notes on it, and then we'll get on to all the other stuff we've got to talk about. What has been really cool, I think a cool wrinkle to Doc coming back, is he's coached in this region for so long. He never got into Oklahoma coaching here. He did grow up a huge Barry Switzer Sooners fan in Arkansas. And it's funny that he later worked for Tom Osborne at Nebraska, but he has had the chance. I've seen it before every game. He knows everybody because he's been around here, and he's been around the Big 12 and the old Southwest Conference. And it doesn't matter what team is in town or where he is on the road. There is some old friend on some other staff. And it has been kind of a joy, even from afar, to just watch him get to reconnect and to have just all these relationships he's got. It's amazing, I guess, watching what someone can compile over 45 years in the game. And it's a testament to what a good life in basketball, I think, can give you. The other note, this is a nice, at times light story. We're talking about a guy who lives in a van in a parking lot. But if you want to know what he's done for Porter Moser and what has been a really difficult second season, there's just this passage here that Porter told me about, where the big thing for him with having Doc was having somebody on his staff who understood what it was like to be a head coach, who'd sat in his seat. I've heard Fred Hoiberg said the same thing to me, that unless you've been a head coach, you can think you know what it's like, you can think you know what you're going through, but you can't. His assistants don't know it, but Doc does. And so after that Oklahoma State loss at home on February 1st, Porter had planned to take off his weekly radio show, send an assistant, go watch his son play a high school basketball game. The Sooners got blown out in Bedlam. Porter knew he did not, he couldn't skip out. He had to go face that music. And Doc understood that. And that to me really summed up what it is Porter Moser wanted out of Doc Sadler, and I think the role he's filled. So there's a mix here. There's the fun, light parts, but if you want to know about somebody who's been really important to the head coach of this team and part of it in a really difficult season, that is there too with Doc Sadler.
It's funny too. I'm going to start calling everybody pal. Hey pal, how you doing?
There you go.
I think that's what he calls everyone.
That's what he calls everybody. And he's got guys like Jalen Hill calling people pal. That was another thing Porter noted, was that his spirit just has seeped in, and he's got players using Docisms at random, and so the impact has really been full spectrum in that regard.
Another tough night for the Sooners last night. They go up to Manhattan, and I think they're locked into the 10 seed for next week's Big 12 tournament, which means one senior night this weekend. One final game for a handful of OU players, I think, and also what kind of momentum are they trying to build going into, really anything can happen. Once you get to March postseason, anything can happen. We see all these crazy stories in March. Oklahoma would have to string together 4 hard-fought wins on 4 straight days to make the NCAA tournament. What's the goal going into the finale against TCU, a ranked TCU team? And how do you think this team's going to finish, Eli?
Yeah, I think last night, as crazy as it sounds, you still could have done some contorting to say, well, they went out in the regular season and make, a run to the finals in Kansas City. Could they maybe get themselves back in the conversation? Would that do it? Because obviously, if were they to go on a magical run and win the Big 12 tournament, automatic bid, they're in. But there was still, going into the game last night in Manhattan, I think at least some outside hope that they, even if it was lofty to begin with, but that they could go on a run. And they went to Kansas State and they hung early. They came out well, and then they closed the first half on the wrong end of a 9-0 run. And then it didn't take long after halftime. We were I'm looking at the numbers now. It's 55-37, 7 minutes into the second half. So on either side of halftime last night, they just lost it. I mean, they lost it again, as has been the case throughout all of Big 12 play. They're playing great teams, and you're seeing it. You're seeing the very best of the Big 12, unfortunately, too often against OU, because you're seeing just how capable these other teams are. So you had good performances. Lo Suzan, 20 points. Otega Owe, 18. That's 38 points from your two true freshmen. Do you want to look toward beyond this year? That's something to be excited about. But the outlook now, I think, it gets tough. This is a team, I've said it on here for weeks because it's been the case for several months. They've not won consecutive games since mid-December. December 17th over Central Arkansas and December 20th over Florida. So that was where, even in the lofty projection of maybe they could go make a run, it's got to start with winning 2 straight games. And the fight has been there. You can't blame them for giving up. There's other teams, I think, who have had far easier seasons who've probably given up this time of year. They haven't, but they're playing the best teams in the country. They will remain playing the best teams in the country as long as they're playing this year. And that's where I think, building momentum is still there. A win against TCU would send them into Kansas City looking a lot better. I just don't know that there's anything to indicate at this point that they have what it takes to go on that run they need.
A good sign last night, and not just for basketball, was seeing Bijan Cortez take
Yes.
again. That was a good sign too, because he's 2 games? Is that how many he missed?
Yep, he missed 2 games and stepped away for personal reasons. And program was supportive. Porter Moser publicly was very supportive, and said back with open arms whenever he's ready. On Tuesday, he didn't indicate whether last night would be the return. He said, day to day, we're just going to take this as it comes. But it was really nice to see Bijan back out there, and hopefully doing well. And, another one, Jacob Groves, he had his big breakout out of a huge slump. I mean, there were times over the last month and a half where I think it's fair to say he was at times unplayable. He broke out against Iowa State, and then I was curious to see how he'd follow. And last night, 4 or 5 from the field, 2 of 3 from 3-point, 11 points. That's the Jacob Groves they needed at other times this year. And it is at least nice to see him finding that form again here in the end.
Especially finish up strong playing with his brother.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a special relationship with him and his brother getting to play together. So we're seeing it come to an end. I know they want to relish that.
And it is worth noting just that as we go into the offseason here, everyone but Tanner Groves can return next year. Doesn't mean they will, but this could be the core of a team. And I think there are probably some Sooner fans who see that, and that drives them mad because they've been frustrated a lot this season. But the foundation can be there, and what Porter Moser has spoken about so often has been needing time and needing that core. And so this could be a lot of the same guys that they bring back next year, and I'd imagine they're going to hope to add in the portal.
And that's how Porter built his teams at Loyola too. I mean, he set a foundation. They became old players under his program. They bought into his system, bought into his culture, and that's how they became good. So if you're an Oklahoma fan, I think you're hoping he can build that, start that foundation and build it from year 1 to year 2 to year 3 to year 4. By year 3 and year 4, it's hard being patient. You'll see the product of what he built early. And he's not a bad coach. That's the thing. I mean, you look at the success. His success speaks for himself. So just a tough year for the Sooners. The OU women, boy, they have a chance to win a share of a Big 12 championship if they win at Bedlam on Saturday. A close game Wednesday night, last night, Wednesday night, 90-86 win over Kansas State. They were down 4 with 28 seconds left. K-State misses 3 or 4 free throws. They ran a great sideline play where Skylar Van gets, inbounds the pass to Maddie Williams. It's kind of a give and go from the sideline, and she crashes and makes a layup with about 1.4 seconds to go to send the game into overtime. Taylor Robertson hits a 3, and they never trail in the final period. Just a great game. The funny thing, Eli, about this game was Taylor Robertson, she came to the huddle when it went into overtime. She came to the huddle and she was crying. And then the players explained to us she's real emotional, and she said she was so excited that it was an overtime. She didn't want to lose, and she was pumped up. And she even admitted, "This isn't the first time I cried." And Gina Baranchek, she made me really laugh because she said, "Yeah, Taylor's over here crying," and we're like, "Taylor," and she's smiling and laughing when she says this. She says, "Taylor, you need to get your stuff together." Stuff.
I'm sure that's the word she used.
Jenny asked us to edit out the real word after she said her quote. Get your stuff together because there's still basketball to be played. So it was a really good reason to celebrate these three seniors: Maddie Williams, Anna Lunisa, and Taylor Robertson. Their final regular season game at Lloyd Noble Center. The three of them have played 5, 5, and 6 years. Lanusa's been there 6 years, so they've grown up in this gym. They're Lanusa's 24 years old. She's almost she's mid-20s now, but she's a young lady from Choctaw, and she loves OU basketball. Now it goes down to Bedlam. They're going to go down to Stillwater and see if they can win that game. If they win, they get a share of the Big 12 title. If Texas loses at K-State on Saturday, they're the winner. They're the sole champion of the Big 12, and they get the 1 seed up in Kansas City next week. So big win for the Sooners. There's still stuff to work on. They had a 30-8 lead early in the second quarter and let that lead get away. Third quarter, they just came out flat after halftime. And Gabby Gregory, a Holland Hall graduate from here in Tulsa who played the last few seasons at OU and transferred to K-State, really sparked the second half comeback by the Wildcats. So it was a great basketball game, and all their games were fun to watch. And they really felt like, another thing is, they really felt like they really needed to redeem themselves after really having a dud of a game Saturday against Texas.
Well, you mentioned those seniors, and I wanted to go back to a quote that Vic Schaefer, the Texas coach, had from after that game. I mean, I was there on hand for that, where OU looked very un-OU like against Texas, and now they've kind of clawed back into this Big 12 regular season title race. But Vic Schaefer afterward, they really shut down that trio of Maddie Williams, Taylor Robertson, and Anna Lanusa. And here's what he said after. He said, this was in reference to Maddie Williams and Taylor Robertson. It's like playing Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle. They're third and fourth leading scorers in the history of Oklahoma, and they're both neck and neck. And then you've got Anna. If she hadn't been hurt, she'd probably be 1 or 2. The kid is an offensive machine. And so the respect for those three seniors they've got is really present across college basketball. Their names are going to remain in the record books long after they're here. And so it is quite a trio they sent off last night. And the good news is they've got a whole lot more to play for after last night and in the coming weeks, which I think is quite exciting.
We get to this time of year, Eli, we talk basketball. Of course, it's March, so we're going to talk basketball. It's basketball heavy. I mean, this is the month when March Madness hits, but there's still time for football. We're getting ready for spring football too. That's going to start in a few weeks. That'll be here before you know it. We're just about 3 weeks away from that. So that it's like Christmas in the spring for OU football fans. But this week's an important week for some of the outgoing players who are taking place in the combine. OU sent 7 to the combine this year. Eric Gray, Anton Harrison, Marvin Mims, Wanye Morris, Jalen Redmond, Michael Turk, and Braden Willis. Biggest interview of their lives. They're going to, get poked and prodded during medical evaluations. They're going to meet NFL teams where they're going to ask some of the weirdest questions and they got to answer, correctly. They're going to meet the media and they're going to answer tough questions from the media. And then the biggest thing is the on-field performance. I mean, we're seeing it on TV, everything they do from the 40 to, to running routes to blocking drills. Everything's going to be on TV on the NFL Network. It's going to be a fun weekend for a lot of these guys. It may be a stressful weekend, but it's always neat seeing these guys prepare for that transition from college football to the NFL. Yeah,
I mean, you talk about the guys you're most excited to see there and see what they do. For me, it probably starts with Anton Harrison, who, he was great last year. Believe it or not, I mean, I'm looking at a mock draft, and man, this time of year, you can look at mock drafts and it'll change over and over. You can get really caught up in it. But just in terms of where he could go, Mel Kiper from ESPN has Anton Harrison at number 13 overall to the New York Jets right now. In a different ESPN mock draft, Matt Miller has him at 49th, so second round. But he's probably the guy, that we've had so many years. Eric, you were there for a lot of them, of first overall picks and first rounders. We're not looking at that kind of draft for the Sooners this year, but I think Anton Harrison is probably that guy who's locked in to maybe go first among them. And this could be a really big week for him. I mean, if someone like Mel Kiper projects him as high as that, it probably means that he's at least got some the attention of a lot of these teams. So good week for him, whether it's in the drills or in these meetings, could be really big. Another guy I'm excited about is Michael Turk.
Yeah.
He may be the number one punter in this draft. And so, don't wait around trying to hear his name day one or day two, maybe, but I think he's going to be coveted as well. And it is exciting to see some of these guys we covered in Norman get their shot and get to kind of shine on this national stage.
I think it's a big weekend for guys like Jalen Redmond, who really need to go out there and show these scouts what they can do. I mean, he's a guy, he didn't have the prototypical size, but, can he play bigger than what he is? Can he play stronger than what he is? I think that they want to take a good look at Jalen Redmond and even Braden Willis. I mean, Oklahoma fans saw what he can do, his versatility, and, and you're not going to meet a better character guy. I mean, just an outgoing guy who's going to do anything for your franchise if you draft him, but he needs to prove himself on the field. I think that's the big question mark with him. And maybe it's, showing that, hey, I can be that special teams guy. I can do this. I can be a third down back. I can do whatever you need me to do. So I think for Braden Willis, he's going to win the interview sessions. It's just going out there on this on-field performance and showing what he can do with his athleticism and size and how he can help a team.
Yeah, I mean, going back, I wrote about him in the fall, and he said it that he came back to OU last fall in order to show NFL teams. I think he'd gotten the feedback. They're impressed with his blocking. They're impressed with some of those things that you do, but they wanted to see if he could catch passes, and he did that in the fall. And given the fact that he's essentially played fullback, tight end, and then receiving tight end, I think he's shown that he can do it all. I'll be curious, if NFL teams agree or where they maybe see him. Another guy's Eric Gray. What are pro teams going to think of him? I think he's another one who shown versatility. He can catch passes. We know. He ran the ball really well last year. I don't think you're talking about a number one running back right out the gate, but I can imagine that a guy like him who's so experienced could maybe help a team. And I wonder if he could help his own stock this week as well.
And last thing about Eric too, is just the way he's willing to block. I think that's something to look at. And, willing to block is something Marvin Mims did too. We all know he can catch the ball, but he was a, downfield blocker as well. Marvin Mims is another guy we're going to have to keep an eye on too, to see, where he fits in. And I think he's going to be one of those guys that's, after Anton Harrison, I think Marvin Mims will probably be the second drafted player of this group of OU players. So NFL Combine, and Pro Day, end of the month, right? I do the 30th, March 30th, Pro Day. So we'll get a chance to see a lot of these guys down March 30th. Will they work out? Will they won't? Maybe they won't. I don't know. But it'll be good just to catch up with these guys and see, where they are going into the final month for the draft.
Well, Eric, we got, if we're moving on from there, I think the next logical place is gymnastics. No,
1 versus 2 Friday night.
Big.
And it's everything's big, and this is a process for the gymnastics program. And they each month they make steps, and now they're coming up their final month, six weeks of gymnastics, and they're going to hit the ground running in March with Florida coming to town.
This is kind of the start of, I think, the rest of their season. Really, this is March now. I wrote last week about how February was about kind of building up for this time of year, and now they're in it, and they're diving headfirst in with a Florida team that they visited and lost to last year on their way to a national title, then beat them in April at the NCAA championships. And this tomorrow night, the biggest thing in women's college gymnastics will be in Norman. I know KJ Kindler spoke this week. They're hoping for a crowd. They talk about it all the time. These SEC programs like Florida, like LSU, they can count on any given night 12,000 people to show up to a gymnastics meet. OU has had some great crowds. They have that program record set against UCLA in 2019 of 10,177. I think they'd like to take a stab at that. I don't know if it's going to happen tomorrow night, but this is big. This is, as I said, the eyes of the women's gymnastics world will be on Norman, and I think it's kind of a dual thing of this is something to measure themselves against. At the same time, it's an individual sport, and it's their season. They're not playing for contention in the NCAA championships. They'll be there. They'll probably see Florida there. So this can just be, I think, a measuring stick at a pretty critical time of the year, and a chance for them to see where they stack up. I mean, they haven't met anyone yet who's been on their level. We'll see if Florida can give them a good run. March
Madness, it is not just basketball. Mm-hmm. And finally, the diamond sports. Oklahoma softball back to number 1. Eli 14-0 win over previous number 1 UCLA. 6 home runs. They had 20 hits. And everyone wondered, this time last week when we were wondering, what's this softball? What's the story of the softball team? Are they the same as last year? I mean, are they good? Or what can they find themselves? And they just went out and they just made a statement, really. Like I said, 6 home runs, 2 by Kinsey Hansen. Amazing game. Just they really solidified themselves as the number 1 team in the country.
Yeah, you said it. I have a personal rule that I think most should apply to. Don't pay attention to February results on baseball, softball. I mean, we're just so early in the year, all that. But OU taking the loss they took, falling 1 spot, and then getting to play the team they fell behind. You said it right. Statement. They got to come there and just make an absolute statement. And I do think, again, I don't know that win or loss that day so much matter, but I think we learned a lot about this team that has some new faces, that is maybe looking for new leaders in terms of how they responded and enforce. This happens to look a lot like the Sooners I think we've become familiar with.
Well, Eli, you remember UCLA. I mean, UCLA is one of the most powerful teams in the country. Last 2 games, counting last year's World Series game, OU's outscored them 29-0 in the last 2 games. I think OU might be in their heads a little bit. We had a chance to talk. Go ahead.
Well, and that is where I think statement, a 2-1 win over the weekend, we'd still be talking about, the 2 best teams in the country next to each other. The way the Sooners went about their business, we'll I'm sure we'll see them again. I hope we see that matchup again. But until then, OU has made the statement and separated themselves into a totally separate group with that.
Oklahoma, we had a chance to talk to Alex Tarocco yesterday at a press conference. Now the new Michigan transfer is 4-0, and she is the Big 12 pitcher of the week after shutting out UCLA, 3 hits. She's taken it all in stride, and I think Patty Gasso has just been impressed with, she's just her attitude, her fiery attitude on the mound. She's excited about pitching her, and and I asked Patty about this. She has 4 really good pitchers now. How do you rotate them? And she said it's a challenge. It's going to be something that they're going to have to really look at. They have plans every game. They have a starter. They have someone they're going to come out of the bullpen, and they have a closer. They have a plan for each game, but they just haven't had to use that. And all 4 pitchers have had success. And out of the 4, Jordy Ball has the lowest ERA. Imagine that problem when you have Jordy Ball as your 4th best ERA on a pitching staff of 4. So Oklahoma, pitching wise, they're doing good. Hitting wise, Jocelyn Erickson, the freshman, 571. She's top 10 in the country in hitting. Just a powerful left-handed batter, 5 home runs this season. Something about the name Jocelyn, Eli. Something about
man. They got to work on that pipeline more. They've found something there.
Yeah, 26 extra base hits last weekend in 5 games, 27 singles. That's an incredible stat. 27 singles, they had 53 hits overall. So 26 went for extra bases. They were a good bat. And we're talking about pitching, we're talking about offense. Something I asked Patty Gasso, and she's ecstatic about, is their defense. Their fielding percentage is .990, and it's funny because she mentioned this. The fields weren't that good in California because of weather, and there were the balls taking crazy hops, and they didn't have an error this weekend in California. So they're .990. They're top 3 in the country in fielding. So offense, defense, pitching. I tell you, it's the perfect combination for a softball team right now.
So the takeaway is that OU softball under Patty Gasso is still elite. That's our big takeaway.
I think so. I mean, I tell you, crushing news to the softball world and lightening all the Sooner Nation. I know Sooner Nation's excited. Lastly, baseball, last but not least for sure. Had a game canceled today. I think they were yesterday, right? It's supposed to go to
Arlington. They were supposed to be at UT Arlington on their way to another tournament this weekend in Frisco. Weather hit and they canceled it. That's another feature of February baseball. But I guess on the flip side of what I was saying before, don't read into too much. I mean, this last week, on Friday, OU fell to 2-4. They dropped the opener against Ryder, and if you go on Twitter, you can see Sooner fans, baseball fans, wondering what's up. They come back, they win the next 2 games, and now they're back at 500. And it was a really encouraging weekend. Beyond climbing back to win that series, you got all 3 of their starters, all 3 transfers, put together a really nice line. Just quality pitching. I mean, they weren't lights out. They weren't throwing the no hitters that you're seeing up in Stillwater, but just the kind of pitching you need from your starters to keep you in games. And then with that, the offense heating up. Guys like Anthony McKenzie hitting exceptionally well. Bryce Madron, the junior college transfer, leads the nation in walks. Wallace Clark, the Holland Hall guy, he's hitting. So they're getting there. And I think, if you want evidence of what, February versus April means in college baseball. Look at last year. We'll say it a ton of times. OU, I think with Skip Johnson, is a lot more concerned with April, May, and June and where they are then than a result in February. So I think they're building towards it. They're kind of back on even keel. We'll see what they do this weekend. So they got 3 power conference opponents in Frisco, and that might be kind of our next best measuring stick for them.
Oklahoma, and I failed to mention Oklahoma home opener for softball this weekend. They got Illinois, Chicago, 3:00 Friday, followed by a game against Kentucky. I couldn't think about it at 5:30, and then they switch opponents and they play 3 and 5:30 on Saturday. So 2 games against both those opponents too. So, and another thing about baseball, they didn't play a game yesterday, but I drove on the way to the softball interviews. I drove by the baseball stadium. They were having an inter squad. Boomer was playing Sumer on the
There
scoreboard.
you go.
So they were getting their work in. I mean, that's important. They're keeping on schedule and they're getting their work in. Eli, we went a long time today, man. You want to?
I know we went long. Well, it's going to be a good sports weekend in Norman. We laid it out. You got gymnastics tomorrow night, where I'd say, I don't know if you're around, I don't know what excuse you have not to go fill Lloyd Noble Center for that. You've got basketball Saturday, OU, TCU, and then you've got softball throughout the weekend. So it's a good sports weekend in Norman. I hope, set it up pretty well, put it on the platter. We went pretty long here, Eric, but I hope hope our bosses don't yell at us and hope people enjoy it. But you can find us, as always, anywhere you get your podcast, Spotify, Google, Apple, anywhere, TulsaWorld.com. We've got a lot of great stuff out. Eric is covering the hell out of softball and women's hoops, who are both at really exciting times in their seasons. We'll have men's basketball all the way through. We've got a story on Doc Sadler up right now. So there's tons at TulsaWorld.com from us and our colleagues who cover Tulsa and Oklahoma State. We're as good as ever. And so thank you for listening. And Eric will be back next week.